So I'm curious, what do you folks call the 48 contiguous states? Do you have words for it? The continent, mainland, crazy land. In all my years in Hawaii, when I lived here on this island in the 70s and 80s, I usually heard it referred to as the mainland. Recently, though, I read something from a Hawaiian author who reported how disrespectful that is to the original inhabitants of these beautiful islands. I want to be respectful of those original people. Where I live in Ocean View on the Big Island, going to the family farm on South Point Road, I see that place nearly every day where those brave seafaring travelers first landed on these islands. That Hawaiian author encouraged people to use the word continent instead of mainland. I realized that this is the mainland for Hawaiians from the original Polynesian settlers. Some people might say that Hawaii is a microcosm of all the world, with all the different people who have settled here and live here, every color, every creed, every kind. Some people say New York City is a microcosm of the world, with all the different people who live and work there. I worked in New York City and went to seminary in New York City, not to the one that most Unitarian Universalists go to, the liberal Christian one, though I did take quite a few classes at Union Theological Seminary. I graduated from New York Theological Seminary. It was, when I started in 2007, mostly conservative Christian, mostly Black and African American, some Latinx, some Korean, mostly male, almost all straight, and not very welcoming to LGBTQ folks. My best friend, Sister Diari, and I were the only white females in our class. The LGBTQ folk didn't speak up. Besides NYTS being cheaper and having night classes, I really didn't want to go outside my comfort zone. I did want to go outside my comfort zone of what mostly white Unitarian Universalists can be. I took a preaching class from Bishop Yvette Flunder, and she became one of my sheroes and inspired me to speak up gently about the discrimination. She is now on the board of Star King School for the Ministry, and that is one of the two Unitarian Universalist seminaries. She is an out Black lesbian, former gospel singer with her wife, raised Pentecostal, and serves on the United Church of Christ, serves in it, the liberal one, the one that we call our cousins, Unitarians considering Christ. Yeah. Bishop Flunder pastors a church in Oakland named the City of Refuge. Planning to preach about covenant today has me thinking about the Jewish roots of Unitarianism, the original belief that there is one God, and about the Rabbi Jesus. In the preaching class, Bishop Flunder challenged us to choose a pericope, a word I'd never heard before. That's a passage in the Bible, and preach it in the first person, like we were actually there. Like some folks, I do have my favorite Bible passages and what I choose to lift up and what I choose to ignore. I chose to preach about the Canaanite woman who begged Jesus to cure her daughter. There are only 6 lines of conversation between them. Jesus was not very polite in my interpretation. He was rude, even prejudiced, and maybe misogynistic. He told her in verses 25 to 27, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him. saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." What is the message here, and what does it have to do with covenant? Jesus was fully human. He was tired and frustrated with being treated badly by the Pharisees in Jerusalem, and he let his frustration out on someone hurting, someone in deep need of mercy that he could give. Deeply human. I know I've done that, and I bet you have too. And because she was not of his Jewish religion, but a Canaanite, a pagan, he probably didn't think he was in covenant with her. So it was okay to be dismissive. He was certainly not being honest, direct, and respectful. I prefer to think of Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu and all the enlightened beings who have walked this earth as fully human and still making mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we forgive ourselves and we start again. And maybe, just maybe, we begin to draw the circle wider, to see more than we could see before, to see that truly all the world is one. And if it is, why would we not be in covenant with other humans? Is covenant only for people just like us, or what we appear to be? What about people truly on the margins, those to whom Bishop Flunder and so many have spent their lives reaching out to help? Some Christians also believe Jesus knew just what he was doing, that he was teaching his disciples how to be, how the message that love and mercy and grace and safety are available to all persons, no matter the differences that can divide us. And it took an outcast, a Canaanite woman, to show the disciples that all are worthy of love and grace and healing and safety. Creating safety is something that comes from developing a covenant of right relations in our churches. It clarifies expectations among us. Covenant is a Latin for come together and actually means a solemn agreement or promise from the heart regarding a course of action between parties. In one of my ministries in Texas, the Board of Trustees asked me to help them find or create a covenant that would be explicit in how they, the congregants, and me, the minister, how we all communicate, how we treat each other, how we are together. Trust had been broken there the year before among congregants and the minister, and it had been broken in the past. Sadly, things happen in our churches that need healing. One of the things that helped support me, the minister, was my UU colleagues group. One of the things that particular ministerial group focused on beyond supporting each other was understanding family systems thinking, which is required of all Unitarian Universalist ministers to understand and practice. Two of the ministers had had the privilege of working with systems guru Dennis Adams in California, and they introduced us to this tiny and powerful book that I didn't bring in here, called Honest, Direct, and Respectful. I have introduced it to all the churches that I've served as a way to communicate that holds us to our covenantal agreements. To get to a new covenant in that Texas church, we went through a long and helpful process with a leader in our Unitarian Universalist regional staff. We got very explicit in the covenant under three broad categories, And we created a healthy congregations team to help folks look at things that they appreciated and things they'd like to see changed. We put up a hall bulletin board with the team members' names and pictures on it in a place where congregants could share their appreciations. The church we modeled after believed that secrets breed gossip, and someone always gets hurt. They require full transparency. Most of us aren't used to speaking very directly. Few have developed the communication muscles to be honest, respectful, and direct. We tend to be passive or aggressive, especially about the ministers and leaders. Here's an example of passive, not direct or respectful, probably not honest communication, and definitely not in right relationship. It's not from this church, but could be any church. The lay leader speaker at the 9 a.m. forum before worship service announces in the forum, "We are losing members because the ministers calls the next program worship and lets people light candles like it's religious. And I won't go to that until he changes or leaves." Or an example from the Time for All Ages. That communication has to be careful. We want to learn to speak honest, directly, and respectfully within the church so that we can accept each other, be like that as new people come in, or when we go out into the community, when we extend our covenant out into the world, where we can model being radically inclusive for others. What would that look like? What are we called to do? One minister has said on a recent Sunday morning, "I described our congregation as extraordinarily imperfect." Some of you may have appreciated that phrase in particular, and that in your comments led me to consider those words more carefully. This is the minister speaking. "The more I think about them, the more truly they feel. We really are extraordinary and wholly imperfect too." I wonder, does that ring true for you here in this congregation? These ruminations reminded me of a blog post by Reverend Dr. Victoria Weinstein, who has long been critical of Unitarian Universalists' sense of what she calls terminal uniqueness. She says, "I've been screaming and yelling and doing everything but laying down on chancels, throwing temper tantrums for years against liberal religious terminal uniqueness, that bizarre insistence that lefty Christians and Unitarian Universalists have that we're really the only unique game in town. We're the thinkers. We're the skeptics. We're the ones who stand on the side of love. We're the ones who don't want to be told what to believe." Yes, she says, like every other mainline Protestant church I've ever served, and I have met thousands of people. She continues, "But we are uniquely ourselves. There is no other congregation that is just like this one. And this is a community in which many people feel uniquely at home, where we belong, even as the world around us feels unfriendly and dismaying. As such, it is extraordinary in our lives." She says, "More important to me, though, is our Unitarian Universalist imperfections. I don't even like the word perfect, fraught as it is with judgment and unachievable standards that lead its pursuers to perpetual fretfulness. Rather than perfection, I value meaning and sincerity. I want to share time with people who are real and truthful and unpretentious, people who take worthwhile risk and make mistakes and learn from them. She concludes, we don't strive for perfection in our religious exploration. We do strive for other things: understanding, connection, belonging, justice, peace, equity, progress, growth, deepening, even excellence in some things, but not perfection. I invite us to look also at one of my heroes, Reverend Dr. William Barber calls us to in his book, Repairers of the Breach, Rekindling a Prophetic Moral Vision for Justice, Social Change, and Movement Building. He says, our communities are torn apart by hateful violence and words, often in the name of opportunistic and hypocritical interpretations of the world's oldest holy books and teachings. To repair the breaches caused by centuries-old systems of racial and gender inequality, we need thousands of clergy and lay leaders who will dedicate their lives to rebuilding, raising up, and repairing our moral infrastructure. Repairing our moral infrastructure. They shall be called the repairers of the breach, restorers of our communities. How do we do that in the larger community and in our own churches? We can pursue policies and organizing strategies for the good of the whole, educate the public about the deep connections between shared religious faith traditions and public policy, deeply rooted in our Constitution and the moral values of justice, fairness, and the general welfare. I know this church has done that well with LGBTQ support. I was thrilled to see that you offer a door. When I was in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, I got to work with Paula Cole-Jones on our district anti-racism group. She's the one who is behind a door. I was on the steering committee of Allies for Racial Equity for several years. It's a different way of looking at anti-racism work that white people have a lot of learning and unlearning to do before we can work together well with people of color. Amen. Reverend Barber gives us some more direction. He says we are to challenge the version of the ultra-conservatives who have misinterpreted Christianity and other faith traditions as a faith that hates the poor. They call 47% of us takers, and they want to shut down any government agency that tries to provide for the general welfare and just economic systems. We need to develop effective messengers of the social gospel in places of worship, in communities and workplaces, who will understand the values at the heart of anti-racism, anti-poverty, and the anti-extreme militaristic movement. Develop leaders with a clear, progressive moral vision for leadership in this country, and remain true to a principled approach to eliminating poverty and racism. I would say we have lots of other things that we have to work against now, too. Reverend Dr. Barber encourages us to find more ways for direct service. It reminds me of my 1 year of serving a downtown church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That is my only regular church experience with direct service. And it gave me so many fond memories. especially this one. The church piano and organ tuner came in one day during our all community breakfast. We made breakfast for anybody who wanted to come in. He watched the people serving who were our congregants and other groups who wanted to have that experience of direct service as they treated our guests with courtesy and respect, talking and serving, taking their orders, sitting down, chatting together. He said, "You know, if Jesus were here, I think he'd say, 'This is what I meant. This is love in action.'" The variety, the mix of people, it is humbling and joyful and helps you to understand that we are all one, sharing this one world, one land. And it matters that you get the chance to do something good with your life, outside of your life, even for a little while. My most sincere desire that we as Unitarian Universalists move beyond speaking, some might say pontificating, about what we say we believe, and move more into living our beliefs. And yes, we have to start where we are in our own congregations, treating everyone with respect and kindness, practicing that, living that, building the beloved community within our walls so that we can go out beyond our walls, out there where there are folks who desperately need to hear and see and live our message. The message today of our Unitarian roots, that there is a oneness that connects us all together. Amen. Ashe. May it be so.